Good evening. As you listen to the sound of my voice, you might begin to notice your breath deepening, slowing. Allow me to be your gentle guide tonight, effortlessly leading you through the peaceful landscapes of history. Our shared journey has no goal other than rest. And it doesn't matter if you hear every word, as your mind begins to drift towards the peaceful heart of a story about a light that was both beautiful. As you begin to settle, just one gentle thought. If this space feels like a comfort to you, you might consider a soft tap on the like or subscribe button. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel like sharing, you can leave a quiet comment, letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you now. It's a nice way to feel connected in this quiet, shared moment. But only if that thought feels as effortless as a quiet breath. And now, with the lights turned down low, and your body feeling heavy and warm, let's simply close our eyes and arrive at the beginning of our journey. You are standing on the threshold of a new century, the 20th century. The air itself feels different, buzzing with a kind of electric hope. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages still echoes on the cobblestones, but it's increasingly joined by the unfamiliar rumble of the automobile. People are talking about flying machines, moving pictures, and voices that can travel through wires. Everything feels possible. Progress isn't just a promise, it's a roar. And at the heart of this roar, lies soft but otherworldly glow. The whisper has a name, Radium. It's the celebrity element, the belle of the ball. Discovered just a few years ago by the brilliant and tireless Marie and Pierre Curie, it has captured the world's imagination. They toiled for years in a leaky shed in Paris, stirring huge vats of pitchblende, a dark, heavy ore, until they had isolated something miraculous. Something that seemed to defy the laws of nature. A substance that produced its own light, its own energy, seemingly forever. It was a tiny, captured star, a piece of the sun you could hold in a vial. And because it glows with this tireless energy, the world makes a very simple, very hopeful, and very wrong assumption: if it can glow forever, surely it can give some of that life, some of that energy to us. Suddenly, radium is everywhere. It's the miracle cure you've been waiting for. Doctors, entrepreneurs, and outright quacks start hailing it as the fountain of youth. You see advertisements for radium-laced water, called liquid sunshine, guaranteed to restore vigor and vitality. There are radium cosmetics that promise to give your skin a youthful luminescence. There are radium chocolates, radium toothpastes, radium heating pads. There was even a device you could hang in your well to irradiate your drinking water for the whole family's health. It was touted as a cure for everything from arthritis and gout to, presumably, a boring Tuesday afternoon. It's a strange and wonderful time to be alive. Science is seen as a benevolent magic, and radium is its most potent spell. No one really understands how it works, not yet. They just see the effect as constant, gentle, blue-green light that never, ever goes out. The thinking is that this energy must be good. It must stimulate the body's cells, chasing away sickness and decay like light chasing away shadows. Now historians still debate just how much the early scientific community truly understood about the potential dangers. There were early reports of researchers getting burns from handling the material, but these were often dismissed as minor side effects of a powerful medicine, like the sting of an antiseptic. The overwhelming narrative was one of wonder. The idea that something so beautiful, so seeming life-giving, could be harmful was almost unthinkable. It was like suggesting that sunlight itself was a poison. The evidence of its harm was a whisper, the chorus of its praise was a symphony, and you believe it. Everyone does. You read the articles in the paper. You see the ads in the magazines. You hear people at the general store talking about the new radium spa, where wealthy patrons go to sit in irradiated rooms to cure what ails them. For you, radium is a symbol of a bright, shining future. It's a distant, expensive miracle, something for the rich and the scientific. You never imagine it will have anything to do with your own life. But miracles in a world of industry and commerce have a way of becoming products. And that soft, blue-green glow, that whisper of starlight held in a jar, is about to move from the pages of science journals and into the factories of your town. It's about to offer you not a cure, but something that feels almost as miraculous in your world: a job. A very, very good job. The advertisement appears like a small, rectangular promise in the local newspaper, nestled between notices for farm equipment and department store sales. Or maybe you don't see an ad at all, a whisper passed between friends after church, or over a fence while hanging laundry. The United States Radium Corporation is hiring, and they aren't looking for strong men to haul heavy loads. They are looking for girls, young women like you. They call the workplace a studio, not a factory. This word alone sets it apart from every other opportunity available to you. The textile mill on the other side of town is a factory, a place of deafening looms and air thick with cotton dust. The cannery is a factory, a place of steam and sharp smells and hands stained with beets. Those jobs are for survival. They are loud, dirty, and they pay just enough to keep you in the same place you started. But a studio is a place for artists. The job, they say, is to paint the numbers on watch and clock dials. It requires a delicate hand, a steady eye, and nimble fingers, all qualities the world agrees that young women possess in abundance. The work is for a noble purpose too. These aren't just any watches. Many are for soldiers, so they can see the time in the dark of a trench without striking a match that might give away their position. You're not just painting numbers, you're helping the boys overseas. You're doing your patriotic duty, right here from a comfortable chair. And then there's the pay. The pay is astonishing. Not just good, but transformative. The company pays by the piece, for each dial you complete. A fast worker, they say, can make more than 3 times what her father makes in the grimy, dangerous factories reserved for men. This is money for ribbons or a ticket to the moving pictures. This is money that can change your family's life. It can pay a doctor's bill, buy a new winter coat for a younger sibling, or even help with a down payment on a proper house. It's the kind of money that offers a different future, independence. So you go. You put on your best dress, you pin up your hair, and you walk to the address you were given. You expect a foreboding brick building with smokestacks. Instead, you find a bright, airy loft. The room is filled with sunlight streaming through large windows, and it's filled with the sound of chatter and laughter. Dozens of other young women, your age, sit at long wooden desks, bent over their work. They look up and smile as you enter. The air doesn't smell of chemicals or sweat. It smells faintly of perfume and something else, something clean and electric, like the air after a thunderstorm. The foreman who greets you is kind. He doesn't treat you like a cog in a machine. He calls you one of the ghost girls, a playful nickname for the way the dust from the paint will make you shimmer in the dark. He explains that the paint is perfectly harmless. In fact, he says with a reassuring smile, it's medicinal. A little bit of radium, he claims, is good for you, puts roses in your cheeks. He shows you the paint itself. It comes in a small ceramic crucible, a thick, greenish-white powder. He mixes it with a bit of water and adhesive, and the powder transforms into a smooth, luminous paint. It looks like crushed emeralds, like captured moonlight. Historians today still argue about the mindset of these managers. Did they see you as valued artisans, the lifeblood of their new and glamorous industry? Or did they view you as a convenient, disposable resource, perfectly suited for a task they would never consider doing themselves? The truth likely lies in a murky place in between, a combination of genuine ignorance and a willful refusal to ask questions that might threaten the immense profits being made. But you don't know any of that. You only see the smiles, the bright room, the incredible pay, and the almost magical substance you'll be working with. You are hired on the spot. You have done it. You have secured one of the best jobs a girl could ever hope for. You'll have your own money, your own status. When people ask what you do, you won't say you work at a factory. You won't say you work at a factory. You paint with light. You are shown to your station, a small space at one of the long desks. In front of you is a tray of tiny watch faces, a delicate camel hair brush with a fine pointed tip, and your very own crucible of glowing paint. The girl next to you leans over. It's easy, she whispers with a grin. I'll show you the trick to getting the brush just right. The foreman was right. This doesn't feel like work. It feels like the beginning of everything. The brush in your hand is a delicate thing, made of fine camel hair that tapers to a whisper-thin point. It's perfect for the tiny, precise world of a watch face. The numbers you have to paint are impossibly small, delicate serifs and graceful curves no wider than a thread. The brass dials sit in a tray waiting. Your crucible of paint glows with a soft, inviting light. You are ready to begin. You are ready to become an artist. But there's a problem. After you dip the brush into the thick, gritty paint, the fine hairs splay out. The point is lost. If you try to paint with it like that, you'll just create a clumsy, glowing blob. The line won't be crisp. The numbers won't be legible. And you get paid by the dial, not just for finishing them perfectly. Anything less than perfect is rejected, and you don't get paid. Speed and precision are everything. This is when the girl next to you, the one who promised to show you the trick, leans in again. Like this, she says and demonstrates. She dips her brush into the paint, then deftly brings it to her mouth. With a quick, practiced motion, she rolls the brush between her lips. Lip, dip, and paint, she says, smiling. She pulls the brush away, and it's now perfectly pointed. The bristles tighten to the crucible for a fresh coat of glowing paint, and with an artist's steady hand, she traces a flawless, luminous number 12 onto the dial. You hesitate for a moment. Put the brush in your mouth. It seems unladylike, maybe. You notice the taste. It's slightly gritty, like chalk, but not unpleasant. There's no strong chemical flavor. Just a faint, tingling sensation on your tongue, a buzz of energy that mirrors the glow in the crucible. The foreman wanders by, and seeing your hesitation, he gives you a warm, fatherly nod of encouragement. That's the way, girls, he says to the room at large. Lip pointing is the only way to get a fine tip. Don't you worry, that stuff is harmless. We eat more dirt in our food every day. The other girls around you all do it. It's as natural to them as breathing. Lip, dip, paint, paint. Lip, dip, paint, tint. A steady, efficient rhythm. The sound of it is the heartbeat of the studio. And so you do it. You dip your brush, bring it to your lips, and feel the bristles against your tongue. You use your lips and tongue to coax the hairs back into a perfect, sharp point. It works. It works beautifully. You dip the pointed brush back into the paint and touch it to the dial. A perfect, glowing line appears. It's satisfying. You do it again for the next number. Within an hour you've fallen into the rhythm. Lip, dip, paint. You do it hundreds of times a day. You swallow a tiny amount of the glowing paint with every single number you trace. Nobody thinks anything of it. This technique was, in fact, taught to you. It's the official, company-approved method for achieving the required quality and speed. Here's a small, strange detail that history has preserved. The paint was not just a marvel of science, but also a triumph of marketing. It was sold under the brand name Undark, a name that was both descriptive and wonderfully optimistic. It promised to undo the darkness. It was a brand name that sounded like a promise of safety, of light, of modernity. You weren't just painting with radium. You were painting with Undark. You and the other girls don't just accept the safety of this practice, you embrace it. The paint is a novelty, a plaything. During breaks, you'd sometimes paint your nails with it, laughing as they glowed in the dimmer corners of the studio. You might trace a glowing initial on the back of your hand, or even paint a thin, luminous line on your teeth to surprise your sweetheart with a radiant smile when you meet him after work. It's fun. Now, historians who have studied the corporate records of the time are still in fierce debate over the extent of the company's knowledge. Did the chemists and executives at the top truly believe their own reassurances? Or were they engaged in a deliberate act of deception from the very beginning? There's evidence that the top chemists and physicists who handled the raw radium in its powdered form used lead screens and ivory-tipped tongs to protect themselves. But the girls in the studio, who were ingesting the material directly, were given no such precautions. This discrepancy is at the heart of the tragedy. Were you seen as too ignorant to understand the risk, or was your safety simply considered an acceptable cost of doing business? The question hangs in the air unanswered. For now, you don't ask these questions. You are young, you are earning more money than you ever dreamed possible, and you are part of a special, glamorous group. You are an artist painting with captured starlight. You get faster, more efficient. You can finish over 200 dials in a single day. With every single one, you bring the brush to your lips, lip dip paint. You are becoming very, very good at your job. And with every tiny speck of paint you swallow, the miracle element is finding a new home. It is quietly, invisibly making its way into your bloodstream, looking for a place to settle, a place to rest, a place to glow. The workday ends, and you step out of the bright, airy studio into the deepening twilight. The factory whistle from the mill across town blows its mournful, weary note, releasing a flood of tired, grimy workers. But you don't feel tired or grimy. You feel energized, important. And as you walk home, something magical begins to happen. You begin to glow. It's not a bright, obvious light. It's a soft, ethereal luminescence, a fairy glow. The dust from the undark paint has settled on your clothes, in your hair, on your skin. When you walk into a dimly lit room, you shimmer. You are a walking constellation. Your friends joke that they don't need ROTTED when you're around. Your parents look at you with a kind of awe. It's as if you've brought a piece of the magic from the studio home with you. You and the other girls become a local phenomenon. You are the ghost girls, the girls who glow. When you go out dancing on a Saturday night, you are the undisputed stars of the dance hall. In the low light, your dresses sparkle, your hair shines with an otherworldly halo. When you smile, your lips and teeth, still dusted with the paint, emit a faint, enchanting glow. It's impossibly glamorous. The boys are captivated. You are living, breathing works of art. You aren't just workers, you're illuminaries. You fully embrace this new identity. You are proud of your glow. It is a badge of honor, a visible sign of your prosperity and your unique, modern profession. Sometimes, you deliberately wear a darker dress to a party, just to heighten the effect. You save up some of your incredible earnings to buy a new cloche hat or a string of beads, and the faint dusting of radium on your skin makes these accessories look even more beautiful, as if they were enchanted. You are no longer just a girl from a working-class family. You are one of the shining women of the new age. The glow becomes part of your daily life in small, intimate ways. At night, when you get into bed and the lights are out, you can see the faint outline of your own hands on the covers. You might catch a reflection in a dark window and see a shimmering, ghostly version of yourself staring back. It's not frightening, it's beautiful. It makes you feel unique, chosen. One of the strangest and most poignant details passed down from this time comes from the memories of the girls' families. Some recalled that when their sisters or daughters would come home and give them a hug, a faint, glowing dust would transfer onto their own clothes. It was a phantom embrace, a trace of light left behind. For a time it was a charming novelty. Later, it would become an unbearable memory. But for now, the world is enchanted by you. You are the subject of newspaper articles celebrating the wonderful opportunities available to the modern woman. You are a symbol of progress. You are proof that industry doesn't have to be dark and satanic, like the mills of the old century. It can be bright, clean, and even glamorous. The scientific community, it must be said, was not entirely silent during this time. There were voices, albeit quiet ones, raising concerns. As early as 1914, a professional society for luminous paint specialists published a pamphlet recommending that workers avoid putting brushes in their mouths. But this was a niche publication, not something you or the foreman at your studio would ever see. The prevailing public and even medical opinion was that radium, when ingested in small amounts, was beneficial. Historians still puzzle over this disconnect, the gap between what a few specialists suspected and what was practiced on the factory floor. Was it a failure of communication, a deliberate suppression of information for profit, or simply a case of a new technology moving so fast that safety precautions couldn't keep up? For you, these distant debates are meaningless. Your reality is the laughter in the studio, the weight of coins in your purse, and the beautiful, ethereal glow that follows you home. You are saving money. You are the envy of your friends. Life has never been better. The future, like the paint you work with, seems to glow with an endless, unwavering light. You believe the reassurances of your employer because you want to, because the alternative is unthinkable. The light is so beautiful, so full of promise. It feels like a gift. You have no way of knowing that this gift has a price, and that your body is already beginning to pay it, silently, invisibly, in the darkest, deepest parts of itself. The glow you wear on the outside is just a faint echo of the much more powerful light that is beginning to build within your bones. It begins, as so many serious things do, with something small and ordinary, a toothache. At first you dismiss it. Everyone gets a toothache. You probably just have a cavity. You try rinsing with warm salt water, the way your mother always told you to. You try dabbing a little clove oil on your gum. For a day or two, it seems to help. But then the ache returns, deeper this time. It's not the sharp, piercing pain of a normal cavity. It feels like the bone itself is aching. You decide you can't put it off any longer. Using some of your hard-earned money, you make an appointment with the local dentist. You sit in his chair, the smell of antiseptic filling the air, and you explain the problem. You point to the molar in the back, the one that seems to be the source of all the trouble. The dentist is a kind, methodical man. He taps the tooth with a little metal instrument. You flinch. He peers into your mouth with his small mirror, his brow furrowed in concentration. He hums to himself. Well, he says, leaning back, it looks like this tooth will have to come out. It's not the news you wanted, but it's better to have a solution. An extraction is unpleasant, but it's better than this constant, gnawing pain. You agree. The procedure is as uncomfortable as you expect. There's a wrenching, grinding pressure, and then it's over. The dentist holds up the extracted tooth in his forceps. He wraps it in gauze, gives you instructions to bite down on a cotton pad, and sends you on your way. You pay his bill, your jaw numb and sore, and walk home feeling a sense of victory. The problem is sore. But it isn't. The socket where the tooth used to be doesn't heal. Normal extractions heal within a week or two, the gum closing over the empty space. Yours remains a raw, open wound. And worse, the pain doesn't go away. In fact, it spreads. The dull ache that was once in a single tooth now seems to radiate through your entire jaw. The teeth next to the empty socket start to feel loose. You go back to the dentist. He looks into your mouth again, and this time, his expression is not one of concentration, but of pure confusion. The bone of your jaw is visible in the unhealed socket. It looks grey and strangely porous, almost like a honeycomb. HES never seen anything like it. He cleans the wound, packs it with gauze, and tells you to come back in a few days. But it only gets worse. Another tooth loosens, so you can't even chew on that side of your mouth. Eventually, it becomes so loose that you can just pull it out with your fingers. There's no blood, just a strange, crumbling sensation. The dentist is baffled. He extracts the second tooth, hoping to stop whatever is happening. But the infection, if that's what it is, continues to spread. Your gums are inflamed and sore. Your breath takes on a foul odor you can't get rid of, and the pain in your jaw becomes a constant, agonizing companion. One of the lesser known and more gruesome symptoms that you and the other girls begin to experience is something the doctors would later call radium jaw. The bone tissue was not just dying, it was actively being destroyed from the inside out. The radiation was causing tiny fractures and lesions throughout the mandible and maxilla. But what's particularly bizarre is that the body, in its desperate attempt to heal, would try to lay down new bone. But this new bone was weak, misshapen, and full of holes, creating a brittle, enlarged, and horribly painful structure. It was as if your own skeleton was turning against you, becoming a strange and monstrous version of itself. You have to take time off from work. The meticulous, delicate painting is impossible when your whole head is throbbing with pain. Your friends at the studio are sympathetic. They pool some of their money to help you. One of them mentions that she's been having some trouble with her teeth too. Another complains of a strange ache in her hip that won't go away, but no one connects the dots. Not yet. These are just the ordinary ailments of life, aren't they? Bad teeth, rheumatism, anemia. Historians are still divided on when the company's medical department began to suspect a connection between your work and these strange illnesses. Some records suggest that early on, company doctors were noting an unusual pattern of dental problems and blood disorders among the dial painters. Yet the official diagnosis given to you and the other women was almost always something else, something that subtly placed the blame on you. You had a woman's malady, or a pre-existing infection. The idea that the glowing paint, the company's miracle product, could be the cause was systematically ignored or suppressed. You visit doctor after doctor. They prescribe tonics and painkillers. They diagnose you with phosphorus poisoning, a known industrial disease common in matchstick factories, but the symptoms aren't quite right. They are stumped. Your health continues to decline. You lose weight. A constant, profound fatigue settles deep in your bones, a weariness that sleep cannot touch. The beautiful ethereal glow that once made you the star of the dance hall is gone, replaced by a pale, sickly complexion, and the ache in your jaw, the one that started with a single tooth, is now the relentless, defining feature of your existence. Your jaw is now a source of constant, excruciating pain. More teeth have loosened and fallen out. The wound from the extractions refuses to heal, and a strange, persistent discharge weeps from it. You can barely sleep. Your regular dentist, completely out of his depth, finally refers you to a specialist in the city, a maxillofacial surgeon with a reputation for handling the most difficult cases. You make the journey, clinging to a fragile hope that this expert, this man of science, will finally have an answer. You sit in a new, more intimidating examination chair in a large, brightly lit office. The surgeon, a stern-looking man with spectacles, listens to your story patiently. He reads the notes from your local dentist. He asks you about your work, and you tell him about the studio, the glowing paint, the lip pointing. You mention it as a point of pride, a detail about your modern, unusual job. He nods, his face betraying nothing. Then he begins his examination. He is gentle but firm, probing the sore, swollen flesh of your gums. He examines the exposed, decaying bone. His frown deepens. He asks his nurse to dim the overhead lights and draw the heavy curtains over the windows, plunging the room into near total darkness. You are confused. He leans in close again, his face just inches from yours. You can hear his soft, steady breathing in the silent, dark room. He asks you to open your mouth one more time, and then he gasps. It's not a loud, dramatic sound. It's a small, sharp intake of breath. The sound of a man seeing the impossible. My God, he whispers more to himself than to you. They glow. In the pitch-black room, the truth is finally visible. The fragments of your jawbone exposed in the raw, unhealing sockets of your missing teeth are emitting a faint, sickly, greenish-white light. The very source of your pain, the very substance of your skeleton, is glowing in the dark. The undark, the liquid sunshine you so carefully painted onto the watch dials, is no longer on your skin or your clothes. It has become a part of you. This moment, recounted by several of the women and their doctors, is a turning point. It's the first irrefutable, visible proof that the radium you ingested has embedded itself deep within your body. The surgeon turns the lights back on, his face pale. He now understands he is not looking at a normal infection. He is looking at something entirely new, something terrifying. He is looking at a jawbone that is being eaten away from the inside out by a relentless, microscopic light. One of the most chillingly bizarre details from the medical reports of the time is the description of what happened when doctors would take X-rays of you and the other affected girls. Normally, an X-ray works by passing radiation through a patient to create an image on a photographic plate. But when they tried to X-ray your jaw, something strange happened. The photographic plate would be overexposed, fogged out, as if it had been left out in the sun. It took them a while to realize why. Your bones were so saturated with radium that they were acting as their own X-ray source. You were emitting so much radiation that you were ruining the film. You were, in essence, a walking, breathing X-ray machine. The surgeon tries to explain it to you. He uses words you've never heard before, words like radioactivity and alpha particles. He describes the radium as an element that is constantly violently falling apart. And as it falls apart, it shoots out tiny, invisible bullets of energy. These bullets are tearing through the cells of your body, shredding your bone marrow, turning your skeleton into a brittle, crumbling ruin. The glow is just a side effect, the ghost of this incredible destructive power. There's a significant historical debate among medical historians about who first made the definitive link between the dial painting profession and this specific, horrific genre crisis. While this New York surgeon, Dr. Theodore Bloom, is oft uncredited with coining the term radium jaw in a 1924 report, other local dentists and doctors had noted the pattern of decay even earlier, but they lacked the expertise or the courage to name the cause. Bloom was the one who looked into the darkness and saw the truth shining back at him. His diagnosis was a bombshell, but it was published in a dense, academic dental journal. It was not yet public knowledge. The surgeon gives you a grim prognosis. There is no cure. He can try to remove the dead pieces of bone, the sequestra, as he calls them, but it's like trying to put out a forest fire with a teacup. The poison is not in one place. It's in your entire skeleton. He tells you, as gently as he can, that your condition is fatal. You leave his office in a daze. The world outside seems impossibly bright and loud. You finally have a name for your suffering, but the name is a death sentence. The beautiful magical light that gave you independence, status, and a future has turned into a monster. And it is living inside your bones. Armed with this terrifying new knowledge, you do what any sensible person would. You go back to the company. Surely this is a terrible industrial accident. Surely once they understand what has happened, they will help you. You believe in their decency. The foreman was so kind. The manager's so reassuring. This has to be a mistake. You schedule a meeting and find yourself sitting not in the bright, cheerful studio, but in a formal, wood-paneled office. You sit opposite a company doctor, a man whose salary is paid by the same people who paid yours. He has a placid, unreadable face. You tell him everything the specialist told you. You use the frightening new words radium jaw, radioactivity. You tell him your job glows in the dark. The doctor listens without interruption. He nods slowly. When you are finished, he doesn't look alarmed or sympathetic. He looks thoughtful. He clears his throat and begins to speak in a calm, measured tone that feels 1,000 miles away from the agony you are in. I've reviewed your file, he begins, and while your condition is unfortunate, we see no evidence that it is related to your work here. He explains that radium, in the small quantities you were exposed to, is perfectly safe. He reminds you of the radium tonics and health spas. Many people, he says, pay good money for the kind of therapeutic doses you received for free. Then the blame begins to shift. Subtly but unmistakably it begins to shift to you. He asks about your dental hygiene. Perhaps you didn't brush your teeth properly. He asks about your family's medical history. Perhaps you have a hereditary weakness in your bones. Then he steers the conversation to a new, more insidious topic. He asks about your social life, your morals. He implies that your illness might be the result of a different kind of poison, a venereal disease like syphilis, which was known to cause bone decay in its later stages. The accusation hangs in the air, unspoken but heavy. He is turning your suffering into a character flaw. Your pain is not their fault. It is a symptom of your own personal failings, your moral weakness. It is a woman's malady, a phrase used as a catch-all for any ailment in a female patient that a male doctor couldn't immediately diagnose or understand. It was a way of dismissing your reality, of branding your physical agony as hysteria or a consequence of your own poor choices. You are stunned into silence. You came here seeking help, and you have been met with slander. The company that praised your nimble fingers and delicate touch is now questioning your virtue. The job that was supposed to be a symbol of your independence is now being used as evidence of your supposed licenses. One of the most infuriating and bizarre facts of this entire ordeal is that the company was, at this very time, commissioning its own internal studies on the effects of radium. While their company doctors were telling you that you were sick because of syphilis, Their own scientists were writing reports confirming the horrific dangers of radium ingestion. One such report, commissioned from a Harvard physiologist named Cecil Drinker, explicitly stated that the dust in the factory was dangerously radioactive and that the lip-pointing practice was a direct route for poisoning. The company received this report, read its devastating conclusions, and then did something truly extraordinary. They buried it. Not only did they hide it from you and the public, they paid another scientist to write a second, more favorable report to contradict the first one. The historical debate here isn't about if the company knew, but when they knew, and how high up the chain of command that knowledge went. Did the doctor you're sitting in front of know the truth and deliberately lie, or was he a pawn, fed only the information the executives wanted him to have? The evidence that has since been unearthed suggests a deep and calculated corporate cover-up, a conscious decision to prioritize profits over the lives of their employee. You leave the office, your hands trembling with anger and disbelief. The physical pain in your jaw is now matched by a new kind of pain, the sting of betrayal. They are not going to help you. They are going to let you die and then say it was your own fault. You feel utterly alone. You have a fatal disease caused by a secret poison, and the people who poisoned you are now trying to assassinate your character. You look back at the factory building, the place you once thought of as a studio, a place of art and opportunity. It now looks like a tomb. You realize that your employers are not your allies. They are your adversaries. And you are in a race against time, fighting not just for your life, but for the truth itself. The glow that once made you feel special now feels like a brand, a mark of their crime shining out from your very bones. The company's denial is a cold, hard wall. But as you retreat from it, nursing the fresh wounds of betrayal, you begin to hear whispers. You are not, it turns out, suffering alone. You start talking to the other girls who worked at the studio, not just your immediate friends, but the ones who left the job a year or two ago. You seek them out in their homes in the quiet, shaded rooms where they now spend their days. And as you share your story, you hear it echoed back to you, piece by agonizing piece. One girl, Amelia, tells you about a limp chest developed. The doctors call it rheumatism. But the ache in her hip is so deep it feels like her bone is being gnawed on. Another, Catherine, shows you her arms. They are covered in strange skin lesions that won't heal. She's been diagnosed with a severe form of anemia, her blood too thin and weak to fight off even the simplest infection. A third girl, Grace, talks about a debilitating fatigue and a constant pain in her back. She's had to quit her new job as a shop assistant because she can no longer stand for more than a few minutes at a time. And then there are the stories about the ones who are already gone. You hear about a girl who died a few months ago. The official cause of death was listed as diphtheria, but her sister confides in you that her jaw had been a mess of ulcers and decay, just like yours. Another girl wasted away so quickly that her family thought she had consumption. The stories multiply, creating a horrifying, invisible web of suffering that connects all of you. You start to make a list, not a formal written document, but a mental tally of names and symptoms. It's a litany of pain-aching jaws, loose teeth, fractured hips, failing joints, anemia, sarcoma. These aren't isolated incidents. This isn't just bad luck. This is a pattern. It's a plague, and the only thing all of you have in common is the place where you worked and the light that you swallowed. You are no longer just a sick individual, you are part of a dying sisterhood. The shared experience creates a powerful, if tragic, bond. The laughter and chatter of the studio are replaced by hushed, urgent conversations in sick rooms. The playful gossip about boys and dances is replaced by a grim exchange of medical information. Who is your doctor? What did he say? Did the company offer you anything? Did they also blame you? One of the strangest and most heartbreaking details to emerge from this period is how the girl's physical appearance has changed. Radium poisoning attacks the bone marrow, the very factory of the blood. This leads to severe, aplastic anemia. The girls, once described as having rosy cheeks from their supposed radium exposure, became ghostly pale. Their hair thinned and lost its luster. They lost a tremendous amount of weight. Their frames becoming fragile and bird-like, they began to look like the ghost girls they had once been playfully nicknamed, but for a much more sinister reason. They were fading away, becoming transparent, as if their own life force was being systematically drained. This slow, dawning realization among the women is a crucial part of the story, though it's one that historians have had to piece together from letters, diaries, and family interviews. There wasn't a single, dramatic moment of collective discovery. It was a creeping, horrifying tide of recognition. The debate among historians here is how quickly this network of knowledge formed. Did the women understand the scope of the problem in months? Or did it take years of isolated suffering before they truly saw the full picture? The fragmented nature of their illnesses, with different symptoms appearing at different rates, made it difficult to see the pattern at first. To that year, a limp there, it took time for the pieces to form a coherent and damning mosaic. As you connect with the other victims, your loneliness begins to transform into a slow burning anger. The company isn't just denying one person's claim. They are denying a clear and devastating pattern of illness and death. Their strategy is to keep you all isolated, to make each of you feel like a unique, unfortunate case. A single sick girl can be dismissed. Her illness can be blamed on her own choices or bad genes. But 5, 10, 20 sick girls, all with the same rare and horrific symptoms, all from the same workplace. That's not a coincidence, that's a crime. You realize that your only hope is to stick together. Your individual voices are too weak to be heard over the roar of the company's denials. But together, maybe you can make a sound they can't ignore. The fight is no longer just for your own life or for a bit of financial compensation to cover your medical bills. It's a fight for the memory of the girls who have already died, and for the lives of the girls who are still, at this very moment, sitting in the bright, sunny studio, laughing and chatting as they bring the tiny, delicate brushes to their lips. The question that haunts you, the one you whisper to each other in quiet rooms, is simple: how? How could a tiny, glowing speck of paint do this to your whole body? How did the light you painted on a watch face end up in your jaw, your hip, your spine? You need to understand the enemy that is living inside of you. The answer comes from one of the few doctors willing to look past the company's official story, a man who is not on their payroll. He sits with you and explains the science, not with condescension, but with a kind of grim urgency. He draws a simple diagram of a human cell, and then a diagram of an atom. He explains that the radium you swallowed, the radium in undock, is a clever and insidious poison. It works, he says, by trickery. The body, he explains, is built from elements it gets from the world outside. It needs calcium to build strong bones. You get calcium from milk, from cheese, from leafy greens. Your body knows what to do with it. It absorbs the calcium from your gut, carries it through your bloodstream, and deposits it into the matrix of your skeleton, making it dense and strong. Now, he says, look at the radium atom. On a chemical level, it looks remarkably like a calcium atom. It's like a counterfeit coin that is so well made, the bank teller accepts it without a second glance. When you swallowed the radium paint, your body made a fatal mistake. It saw this radium, this heavy, unstable element, and it thought, oh, calcium. I know what to do with this. Your digestive system absorbed it, your bloodstream picked it up and carried it to every corner of your body. And then your own biological processes, the very systems designed to keep you healthy and strong, took this poison undutifully, diligently, deposited it directly into your bones. It was a Trojan horse, and your own body threw open the gates and welcomed it in. Once there, the radium settles in for the long haul. Unlike many poisons that can be flushed out of the body, radium embeds itself into the bone tissue itself, replacing the legitimate calcium. And this is where the true horror begins. The doctor explains that radium has something called a half-life. It's the amount of time it takes for half of the substance to decay and lose its radioactivity. For the isotope of radium you were working with, radium-226, the half-life is 1600 years. Let that number sink in. 1600 years. It is a span of time so vast it's almost meaningless. It means that for the rest of your life, and for centuries after you are gone, the radium inside your skeleton will be releasing its energy, firing off those tiny, destructive alpha particles, with almost the same intensity as the day. It is a poison that does not fade. It is a fire that never ever burns out. This, he explains, is why your bones are crumbling. The alpha particles, though tiny, are incredibly destructive. They are like microscopic cannonballs, constantly bombarding the surrounding cells. They shred DNA. They obliterate the delicate structures of your bone marrow, which is why you are so anemic and your immune system is so weak. And they kill the bone cells themselves, leading to the necrosis, the dead, crumbling tissue that the surgeons have to keep cutting away. One of the more obscure and fascinating scientific details is the sheer amount of energy involved. Scientists later calculated that the alpha particles emitted by the radium in the girls' bones were bombarding the surrounding tissue with a force, relative to their size, that was hundreds of times more powerful than the most potent chemical poisons known to man. It was a relentless, microscopic blitzkrieg happening deep within the silent sanctuary of the skeleton. The debate amongst scientists and historians at the time, and one that continues in some form today, was about the threshold. How much radium was too much? The company's argument was that the doses were homeopathic, too small to cause harm. What your case ultimately proved was that with this kind of internal contamination, there is no safe dose. Because the poison is placed directly against the most vulnerable tissues in the body, every single radioactive decay event has the potential to cause catastrophic damage. Your suffering was a brutal lesson in a new field of science that would come to be called radiobiology. The doctor's explanation is terrifying, but it's also clarifying. The mystery is gone, replaced by a grim certainty. You finally understand the nature of the monster. It is a slow, patient, and tireless assassin that you unwittingly invited into your own bones. It wears the mask of a friend, of a building block of life, and it uses your own body's systems to carry out its destruction. The knowledge steals you. The fight is no longer just against a faceless company. It is against a physical reality, a law of nature that has been twisted into a weapon against you. You now understand that you are not just fighting for justice. You are living with a star that has nested in your skeleton, and it is slowly, beautifully, and inexorably burning you alive from the inside out. The company has denied you. The company doctors have lied to you. Your own body has been turned into a vessel for a slow-burning poison. You are running out of money, running out of health, and running out of time. Your only hope lies outside the closed system the company has built around itself. You need an independent voice, an expert with no ties to the radium industry who can see the truth and, more importantly, be willing to speak it. The search for an honest doctor becomes a desperate pilgrimage. You and the other sick girls pool what little money you have left to consult with specialists. It's a frustrating and often humiliating process. Many doctors, upon hearing your story, are skeptical. The symptoms are so strange, so varied: anemia, bone decay, sarcomas, that they don't fit neatly into any textbook diagnosis. The idea that a luminous paint could cause such profound destruction still seems like something out of a science fiction story. Some doctors are simply intimidated. The United States Radium Corporation is a powerful entity with deep pockets and a formidable legal team. To publicly challenge their product, to accuse them of poisoning their workers, is to invite a world of trouble. A local doctor with a small practice and a family to feed might find it easier and safer to diagnose a dental infection of unknown origin than to take on a corporate giant. You can see the fear in their eyes as they gently but firmly show you the door. Others are on the company's payroll, a fact they don't always disclose. The radium industry had a network of friendly medical experts they would refer inquiries to. These doctors were skilled at creating reports filled with jargon and complex terminology that ultimately concluded the same thing: the patient's illness was tragic, but it had nothing to do with radium. But you persist. Your life depends on it. You follow leads from sympathetic nurses, from whispers in hospital hallways. Finally, you find your way to a small clinic in a neighboring city, to a man named Harrison Martland. Dr. Martland is a county medical examiner. He's not a fancy, high-priced specialist. He's a public servant, a man whose job is to find the truth in death. He is a pathologist, which means he is, by nature and by trade, a medical detective. He is known for being stubborn, meticulous, and incorrigible, and he is intrigued by your case. When you sit with him, you feel for the first time that you are being truly heard. He doesn't just listen to your symptoms, he listens to your story. He asks about the studio, the paint, the lip-pointing technique. He takes detailed notes. He doesn't make any promises, but he doesn't dismiss you either. He looks at you not as a hysterical woman or a hopeless case, but as a puzzle he is determined to solve, one of the curious, and for you, life-saving innovations drive. Maitland employed was a new and fairly obscure scientific technique. He didn't just rely on X-rays. He used a device called a gamma-ray electroscope. He had used it in a dark room, and he would hold this sensitive instrument near your body. He found that when he held it near your back, your hips, your legs, the needle would jump. He was measuring the radiation pouring out of your skeleton. Chilling detail, he also had you breathe into a flask. He then tested the air from your lungs, and the needle jumped again. You were not just emitting radiation, you were exhaling a radioactive gas called radon, a daughter element created by the decay of the radium inside your bones. You were literally breathing out the poison. This was the smoking gun. Dr. Maitland's tests were irrefutable. He could not only prove that you had radium in your body, but he could also measure how much. His meticulous, scientific approach cut through all the corporate lies and medical obfuscation. He proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that you were suffering from a new, terrifying, and entirely preventable industrial disease. The historical debate surrounding Drive. Maitland is less about his findings and more about his motivation. Why did he take on this fight when so many others turned away? Some historians portray him as a pure crusader for justice, a classic David versus Goliath figure. Others suggest a more complex picture, that he was also a scientist fascinated by a unique medical mystery, and that your case represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study the effects of radioactivity on the human body. As is often the case, it's likely a combination of both. He was a good man, but also a deeply curious scientist. Dr. Maitland becomes your champion. He writes up his findings in a series of detailed, damning reports. He bypasses the cozy network of industry-friendly journals and publishes his work in mainstream medical publications. He begins to speak at conferences, presenting his irrefutable evidence to the wider medical community. He gives your suffering a name, a cause, and a scientific basis. He cannot cure you. The poison is too deep, the damage too profound. But he gives you something almost as important. He gives you the truth. And the truth is a weapon. The company can dismiss your stories, they can slander your character, but they cannot refute the cold, hard numbers on Drive. Maitland's electrospoke. The tide is beginning to turn. You are no longer just a collection of sick and dying girls. You are evidence. With Dr. Maitland's irrefutable science on your side, the path forward seems clear. You must sue the company. But this is a new and terrifying frontier. Workers' compensation laws are in their infancy, and they are designed to cover accidents, say lost finger, a broken leg. They have no framework for a poison that takes years to reveal itself, a disease that a company can deny is even work-related. Your illness falls into a legal grey area, a dark chasm where justice is hard to find. The company knows this, and they deploy their most powerful weapon, one even more effective than their paid medical experts' time. Their legal strategy is simple, brutal, and chillingly effective. They will delay, and they will wait for you to die. Every step you take is met with a mountain of legal paperwork and procedural hurdles. When you try to file a lawsuit, their lawyers argue that you've missed the deadline. The statute of limitations, they claim, is 2 years, not from the date your employment ended. For some of you, that was 4, 5, or even 6 years ago. You were feeling perfectly fine when the legal clock on your right to sue ran out. You were still going to dances, glowing in the dark, with no idea that a time bomb was ticking in your bones. It's a cruel, legalistic trap. You find a lawyer willing to challenge this, to argue that the clock should start when the disease is discovered, not when the exposure ends. The company's lawyers fight back. They file motions. They demand endless depositions. They schedule hearings and then ask for postponements. They request your medical records, then question their validity. They create a blizzard of paper, a labyrinth of legal maneuvers designed to do one thing: exhaust your resources and your will to live. Each delay is another victory for them. They know your health is failing. They read the medical reports. They know that your bones are crumbling, that the sarcomas are growing, that your blood is thinning. With every passing month you grow weaker. Some of the women who started this fight with you are now too sick to leave their beds. Some have already passed away, their legal claims dissolving into dust along with their bodies. It's a war of attrition, and you are losing. The company is a vast, immortal entity made of money and paper. You are a fragile, finite human being, and the poison inside you is more relentless than any lawyer. One of the odd, and frankly enraging, details of this period is the public face the company maintained. While their lawyers were in court arguing that you were already out of time, their public relations department was still publishing pamphlets and giving interviews about the wonderful health benefits of radium. They were, in essence, trying to sell the poison and deny its effects into different rooms at the same time. This brazen hypocrisy would eventually backfire, but for now it was a shockingly effective strategy. The legal battle over the statute of limitations in your case became a landmark moment in American labor law. The historical debate isn't about the outcome, but about the company's internal justification. Did the executives and lawyers truly believe in their legal argument that you had waited too long, or was it a cynical, calculated strategy from the start, a conscious effort to use the law as a weapon to silence dying women? Letters and internal memos unearthed decades later strongly suggest the latter. They knew. They were betting on your death. You watch as the seasons change outside your window. Summer turns to fall, fall to winter. Each passing day is a small defeat. The pain in your body grows, a constant, grinding reminder of the radium's work. Your savings are gone, spent on doctors who can't help and lawyers who seem to be getting nowhere. You are fighting a ghost, an invisible force in your skeleton, while simultaneously battling a courtroom you are becoming too weak to even enter. The despair is overwhelming at times. It feels like they will succeed. They will drag this out until there is no one left to testify, no one left to demand justice. They will simply wait until the problem goes away. Your friends, your family, they try to keep your spirits up, but you can see the pity in their eyes. You are becoming a ghost before you are even gone. The glow has faded, and now your life itself feels like it is fading too, while the wheels of justice grind to a halt deliberately, cruelly, and with impeccable legal precision. The company's strategy of endless delays is working. The legal battle is stalled, and you and the other women are fading. The world at large remains mostly unaware of your struggle, seeing it as a minor, local labor dispute. What you need is a definitive, unassailable confirmation of your illness from an official source, something that can cut through the legal fog and capture the public's attention. That confirmation comes from a place you never expected: the office of the local coroner. One of your former colleagues from the studio, a woman who had been suffering from a particularly aggressive form of jaw necrosis, finally succumbs to the illness. It's another heartbreaking loss, another voice silenced. But her death provides a grim, crucial opportunity. Because the cause of her illness was so mysterious and contested, her case falls under the jurisdiction of the public medical examiner or champion, Dr. Harrison Martland. His task is to determine the official cause of death. He performs a meticulous autopsy. He examines the woman's tissues, her organs, and most importantly her bones. What he finds is shocking even to him, a man accustomed to the grim realities of his profession. The woman's skeleton is riddled with damage. Her jawbone is a honeycomb of decay, so brittle it crumbles at his touch. There are microscopic fractures throughout her spine and femurs. But the most damning evidence comes when he takes a piece of her bone and places it on a simple photographic plate in a dark room. He leaves it there overnight. When he develops the plate the next morning, the image is stark and ghostly. It's an auto-radiofying, a picture taken by the bone itself. The bone has printed its own image onto the plate, using nothing but the light of its own internal radiation. It is a photograph of the poison, a self-portrait of the killer. This is the moment the whispers and accusations solidify into cold, hard scientific fact. Dr. Maurer write the official cause of death on the death certificate. not as ulcerative stomatitis or anemia, but as radium poisoning. It is the first time the disease has been officially named as the killer of a dial painter. This specific technique, the autoradiograph, is a fascinating and eerie piece of the story. It was a relatively new scientific tool, but its power was in its simplicity and visual impact. You could argue with the doctor's opinion. You could discredit a grieving family's testimony. But you could not argue with the photograph created by the bones of the dead. It was evidence from beyond the grave. Dr. Martland's official finding is a bombshell. It's no longer your word against the companies. It's the county coroner's official, legally binding conclusion. The company doctors can no longer dismiss your symptoms as syphilis or poor hygiene. They now have to contend with a death certificate that explicitly names their product as a poison. The historical debate here centers on the impact of this first official confirmation. Did it immediately turn the tide of public opinion, or was it a slower burn, a key piece of evidence that lawyers and journalists would use to gradually build a case in the public eye? The evidence suggests it was the latter. It wasn't a single headline that changed everything, but this official death certificate became the solid foundation upon which all subsequent claims were built. It was the first stone that started the avalanche. For you, the news is both devastating and validating. Your friend is gone, a vibrant young woman who once laughed and joked at the long tables of the studio. The grief is a heavy, physical thing, but mixed with the sorrow is a flicker of something else: hope. The truth is finally out, stamped in official ink on a public document. The company's wall of denial has its first real crack. They can no longer claim that there is no evidence linking their work to your illnesses. The evidence is now buried in the local cemetery, and it is still glowing. This official verdict gives your own doctors more confidence. It gives the lawyers a powerful new weapon. And it gives you and the remaining women a renewed sense of purpose. You are not just fighting for yourselves anymore. You are fighting to ensure that your friend's death certificate is not just a historical footnote, but a turning point. You are fighting to make sure that her name, and the truth of why she died, is never forgotten. The company had hoped her death would be the end of her story. Instead, thanks to a determined medical examiner and a piece of photographic film, her death becomes the most powerful testimony yet. Dr. Martland's findings and the official death certificate give you scientific and moral authority. But in the brutal world of the legal system, that isn't enough. You need a lawyer, not just any lawyer who handles wills and property disputes, but someone willing to take on an industrial giant in a case that has no precedent. The search is just as difficult as your search for an honest doctor. Most established law firms want nothing to do with you. Your case, they say, is a losing proposition. The statute of limitations issue is a formidable barrier. You are poor working-class women taking on a wealthy corporation with a team of high-priced attorneys. You can't afford to pay legal fees up front. The case will be long, expensive, and intensely public. For a respectable law firm, it's too much risk for too little reward. They offer their sympathies, but they won't offer their services. You are turned away time and time again. Just as your hope begins to run out, a name is passed to you. Raman Berry. HES, a young lawyer just starting out. His office is small, not in the fancy part of town. He doesn't have a long list of powerful clients or famous victories. By all accounts, he is an underdog, untested and unknown. And that is precisely why he is willing to listen. You and a few of the other women go to see him. You are frail, pale, and in constant pain. You carry your medical records in a worn satchel. You sit in his small office, which smells of books and ambition, and you tell him your story. You tell him about the glowing paint, the lip pointing, the dance halls, and then the toothaches, the crumbling bones, the doctor's dismissals, the company's lies. You show him doctor's dismissals, the company's lies. You show him doctors. You tell him you have no money to pay him. Raymond Berry listens, and unlike the senior partners in the large, mahogany-paneled offices, he sees not a hopeless case, but an outrageous injustice. He is young enough to be idealistic, and ambitious enough to see that a case this public, if he could win it, would make his career. He agrees to take your case on contingency, meaning he will only get paid if you win. It's a massive gamble on his part. He is, by all historical accounts, an unlikely hero. He wasn't a famous crusader for social justice. He was simply a young, competent attorney who recognized a profound wrong and believed he could use the law to try and right it. Historians still debate his primary motivation. Was he driven by a pure sense of justice, a desire for fame, or the tantalizing prospect of a huge settlement? It was almost certainly a mixture of all three. He was a good man, but also a pragmatic one. And in this fight, you needed both. Barry's decision to take the case is a pivotal moment. He is your entry ticket into the system that has, until now, been used against you. He knows the language of the court, the rules of procedure, the ways to counter the company's endless delaying tactics. One of the curious, and for the company, deeply frustrating aspects of Barry's legal strategy was his use of the press. He understood that this case would be tried not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. While the company's lawyers were filing motions in dusty legal archives, Barry was talking to newspaper reporters. He knew the power of a headline, the impact of a human interest story. He made sure your story was told not as a dry legal dispute, but as a heartbreaking human tragedy. He immediately files a lawsuit on behalf of you and for other women. The legal battle that ensues is ferocious. The company's lawyers, seasoned veterans from a top New York firm, treat Barry with contempt. They see him as a small-town amateur, a nuisance they can easily crush. They bury him in paperwork. They challenge every motion. They use every dirty trick in the book to intimidate you and his clients. But Barry is tenacious. And he is clever. He argues that the statute of limitations is a fraud in this case, coining the legal argument that the time of discovery of the illness should be the starting point. He argues that the company knowingly and deliberately concealed the dangers of radium from you, which constitutes a form of fraud that invalidates any time limit. He prepares you for the ordeal ahead. He tells you that the company will attack your character, that they will try to humiliate you, that they will do everything in their power to break you. But he also tells you that you have the truth on your side. For the first time, you are not just a collection of victims. You are plaintiffs in a lawsuit. You have a legal advocate. The fight is no longer just you against them. It's you and your young, untested lawyer, standing together, ready to face the storm. With Raymond Barry as your legal champion, the fight moves into a new arena, the public square. Barry understands that a courtroom can be an insular world, governed by arcane rules and procedures that favor the powerful. The company's lawyers are masters of that world. So Barry decides to open a second front. He starts feeding your story to the newspapers. At first, it's just a small article, buried in the back pages of a local paper. Women sue radium firm claim poisoning. But the details of the story, the glowing paint, the lip pointing, the crumbling bones are too vivid, too shocking to stay buried for long. A reporter from a larger, national wire service picks it up. He gives the story a dramatic, unforgettable name. The name is perfect. It's evocative, tragic, and easy to remember. Suddenly, you are not just a group of anonymous female factory workers. You are a headline. Your story spreads like wildfire from New York to Chicago to San Francisco. Newspapers that once ran advertisements hailing the miracles of radium are now running front-page articles detailing its horrific effects. The public is captivated and horrified. The story has all the elements of a grand tragedy: innocent young women, a magical, glowing substance that turns out to be a deadly poison, and a heartless corporation denying all responsibility. Your personal agony is transformed into a national sensation. Journalists and photographers descend on your town. They want to interview you, to take your picture, to show their readers the human cost of this industrial horror. This newfound fame is a strange and uncomfortable experience. You are weak, disfigured, and in constant pain, yet you are now a public figure. You agree to the interviews, not because you want the attention, but because Barry tells you it's your most powerful weapon. You prop yourself up on pillows in your sickbed and tell your story to a reporter, your voice weak but steady. You describe the studio, the taste of the paint, the first to thatch, the slow, agonizing decay. You let them see the ravages of the disease. You force the world to look. One of the most bizarre and morbidly fascinating details of this media frenzy was the public's obsession with the glowing aspect. Reporters would ask if you still glowed in the dark. Some even brought their own photographers and asked if you'd be willing to be photographed in a darkened room. It was a ghoulish request, turning your radioactive contamination into a sideshow attraction. But it was also a powerful symbol that captured the public's imagination. The very thing that had once been a source of glamour was now the mark of your impending death. The company is caught completely off guard. They are used to controlling the narrative, to issuing press releases filled with scientific jargon and reassuring statements from their paid experts. They have no idea how to combat this wave of emotional, human-centered storytelling. Their denials, which sounded so authoritative in a courtroom, now sound hollow and cruel in the face of a newspaper photograph of a dying 20-year-old girl. The historical debate here concerns the role of yellow journalism in your case. Were the newspapers that sensationalized your story exploiting your suffering for sales, or were they performing a vital public service by exposing a corporate crime? The truth is, they were doing both. The headlines were often lurid and melodramatic. But that sensationalism is what got the public's attention. It created a groundswell of outrage that politicians and judges could not ignore. Private suffering was amplified into a national war. The public outcry is immense. Letters pour into newspaper offices and government agencies. Women's groups and labor unions, who had previously been unaware of your plight, now rally to your cause. The Consumers League, a prominent advocacy group, takes up your case, providing financial support and public pressure. The story of the Radium Girls becomes a national scandal. The judge overseeing your case feels the pressure. The company's lawyers, who had been so successful with their delaying tactics, now find that every motion for postponement is met with a scathing editorial in the next day's paper. The courtroom is no longer their private playground. The whole country is watching. Your fame is a heavy burden, but you can feel its power. You are no longer isolated victims. You are a cause. The company wanted to wait until you were silenced by death. Instead, the newspapers have given you a megaphone. And your weak, fading voices are now being heard across the nation. The tide has truly turned. The day of the court hearing finally arrives. The company's lawyers have run out of procedural delays. The judge, under immense public pressure, has ordered the case to proceed. The courthouse is surrounded by a crowd of reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers. This is the moment you have been fighting for, the chance to face your former employers and tell your story under oath. But you cannot walk. The radium has continued its relentless assault on your skeleton. For some of you, your hips have fractured under your own weight. For others, the bones in your spine have begun to compress and crumble. Your legs are too weak, the pain too immense to support you. You are bedridden, prisoners in your own homes, but Raymond Berry insists you must be there. Your presence is more powerful than any legal argument he could make. So, on the morning of the hearing, a procession of vehicles, some of them borrowed ambulances, some of them simple family cars with the back seats folded down, makes its way through the town to the courthouse. You are gently, carefully lifted from your beds. You are wrapped in blankets and propped up with pillows. Some of you are placed onto stretchers, others into makeshift wheelchairs. The journey to the courthouse is an ordeal, every bump in the road sending a shockwave of pain through your brittle bones. When you arrive, the scene is one of controlled chaos. Flashbulbs pop, reporters shout questions. You shield your eyes, your face pale and drawn. You are carried, one by one, up the stone steps of the courthouse. It is a slow, agonizing, and profoundly public procession. You are not walking into court to demand justice. You are being delivered to its doorstep, living exhibits of the company's crime. The courtroom itself is packed. Every seat is taken. The air is thick with anticipation. When you are brought in, a hush falls over the room. The spectators, a mix of journalists, lawyers, and ordinary citizens, stare in stunned silence. They have read the stories, but the reality of your condition is far more shocking. You are young women, some barely out of your teens, but you look like frail ancient invalid. One of the strange, poignant details remembered from that day was the sheer logistics of it all. The court had to be rearranged to accommodate you. Cots and stretchers were placed in the open area in front of the judge's bench. The courtroom was transformed from a place of legal argument into a makeshift infirmary. You are so weak that a doctor and nurse are in constant attendance, ready to administer medication or assistance. You see the company executives and their lawyers sitting at their table. They look uncomfortable. They refuse to make eye contact. For months they have been dealing with you as an abstraction, a name on a legal file. Now they are forced to confront the human wreckage of their business practices right here in this public forum. The historical debate around this moment often focuses on its theatricality. Was it a genuine necessity for you to be carried in, or was it a calculated move by your lawyer to sway the court of public opinion? The medical records leave no doubt you were genuinely too ill to walk. But Barry, the master of public relations, certainly understood the dramatic impact your entrance would have. It was a moment of pure, unscripted legal theater, more powerful than 1,000 pages of testimony. The judge, a stern, old man who has seen everything in his long career, looks visibly shaken. He calls the court to order, but his voice is softer than usual. The legal proceedings begin. Lawyers drone on about motions on precedents. But everyone's attention is on you, the silent, broken figures lying on the cots and stretchers. You haven't said a word yet, but your presence is the most powerful testimony of all. You can feel the atmosphere in the room shift. The sympathy, the outrage, it's a palpable force. The company had wanted to fight this battle on paper, in the sterile realm of legal theory. But by being there, you have forced the fight into the human realm. You have brought the sick room into the courtroom, and in doing so, you have made it impossible for anyone to look away. You lie on your cot, the starched white sheets feeling rough against your skin. The initial shock of being in the courtroom gives way to a profound weariness. Raymond Barry gives your hand a reassuring squeeze. The judge, seeing the fragility of you and the other women, makes an unusual decision. He announces that he will hear your testimony first before all the legal arguments on procedural matters. He understands, without anyone needing to say it, that you may not have the strength to wait. Your name is called. Raymond Barry approaches your court. He speaks in a soft, clear voice, asking the simple, formal questions that begin all testimony. To state your name for the record, to state your age, to describe where you were employed. When he asks you to describe your duties at the studio, you take a slow, careful breath. The simple act of speaking is now a monumental effort. Your job, what's left of it, is a landscape of constant, grinding pain. You have to form each word with deliberate care, because the bones that allow you to speak are the very bones that are betraying you. We were told to put the brush in our mouths, you say, your voice little more than a whisper. The entire courtroom means in to hear you, to get a fine point. It was the only way. You repeat the simple, hypnotic phrase that has come to define your life and your death. Lip dip paint. That's what they taught us. Barry asks you to describe the paint. You tell him it tasted like chalk, that it had no bad smell. You tell him how you and the other girls used to paint your nails and teeth with it for fun, and how the foreman laughed and encouraged it. You tell him you were told it was safe, that it was even healthy. As you speak, you can feel a familiar, dull ache begin to throb in your jaw, a protest against the effort of articulation. Then comes the cross-examination. The company's lead attorney, a man in an impeccably tailored suit, approaches you. His voice is smooth, professional, and utterly devoid of sympathy. He doesn't shout or accuse. He is much more subtle and much more cruel. He asks if you were ever warned about the dangers of syphilis by public health officials. He asks if you're aware that it can cause bone decay. He is reintroducing the slander, the character assassination, into the official court record. Barry objects, the judge sustains it, but the poison has been released into the air. The lawyer then questions your memory. Did anyone explicitly use the word safe? Or is it possible you just assumed it was? He tries to twist your words, to make you seem like an unreliable, hysterical witness who is exaggerating her symptoms for financial gain. Historians still debate the mindset of these corporate lawyers. were they simply cogs in a machine, zealously representing their clients' interests to the best of their ability, no matter how distasteful the strategy? Or did they, on some level, internalize the company's narrative, truly believing that you were opportunistic liars? The written record shows their cold, calculated legal strategy, but it cannot reveal the contents of their conscience. One by one, the other women give their testimony. Their stories are a heartbreaking chorus of the same themes. One girl is so weak she can barely lift her head. Her testimony is given in short, whispered phrases, with a nurse having to repeat them for the court reporter. Another, propped up in a chair, holds up a small, velvet-lined box. Inside are the fragments of her own jawbone that have fallen out or been removed by surgeons. It is the most macabre and compelling piece of evidence imaginable. The testimony of each girl reinforces the pattern, the work, the toothwash, the denials, the decay. The company's lawyer tries the same tactics with each of them, but their collective story is too powerful to consistent to be shaken. After the last of you has spoken, a profound silence settles over the courtroom. The day's session is adjourned. There were no grand, dramatic speeches. There was only the quiet, fragile, and utterly devastating truth, spoken in whispers from the women who were living it, and dying from it. You are carried out of the courtroom, the same way you were brought in, leaving the weight of your words to linger in the air behind you. You would think, after the raw, devastating testimony from you and the other women, that the fight would be over. You would think that no jury, no judge, no person with a shred of humanity could fail to see the truth. But corporation is not a person. It doesn't feel pity. It feels only the pressure on its stock price and the threat of legal liability. And so, with its back against the wall, the United States Radium Corporation fights back, not with compassion or remorse, but with a calculated, cold-blooded assault on the truth itself. Their turn comes. Their lawyers, who had seemed so uncomfortable while you were testifying, are now back in their element. They stand tall, their voices resonating with confidence. Their strategy is to fold first. They will present their own team of medical experts to muddy the waters. Second, they will try to discredit the one man whose testimony they fear most drive, Harrison Martland. Their experts are impressive figures. They are flown in from prestigious universities, impeccably dressed men with strings of letters after their names. They take the stand one by one, speaking in calm, authoritative tones. They offer a dizzying array of alternative theories for your illnesses. One doctor confidently asserts that your gonocrosis is not caused by radium, but by a virulent bacterial infection, possibly spread through the factory by a single carrier. Another suggests that your anemia and bone problems are the result of poor nutrition, common among the working classes. And of course, they bring up syphilis again. They present it not as a slanderous accusation, but as a legitimate medical possibility that must be considered. They create a smokescreen of scientific jargon, a cloud of doubt designed to confuse the judge and the public. They never have to prove you have these other diseases, they just have to suggest that it's possible. Then they turn their attention to drive Martland's work. They attack his methods, his equipment, his conclusions. They bring in a physicist who testifies that the amount of radium you ingested was infinitesimal, far too small to cause any biological effect. He calls it a homeopathic dose, cleverly using a word associated with harmless alternative medicine. The star witness for the company is a man named Frederick Flynn. He is a physiologist from Columbia University, and he presents himself as the voice of reason against the hysteria whipped up by the newspapers. He testifies that he personally examined some of you. He says he found you to be in generally good health, your symptoms exaggerated. He looks directly at the judge and declares, with the full authority of his university position, that there is no connection between the dial-painting work and the illnesses of the plaintiffs. This is where the company's defense moves from simple denial into the realm of profound, almost surreal dishonesty. Because as you know, and as a few people in the company's highest officers know, they had already been told the truth by another, more honest expert. The Drinker Report, the internal study they commissioned and then buried, is the ghost at this legal feast. They paid for the truth, they didn't like the truth, so they paid for a new one. A truly bizarre and damning detail from this affair is that Dr. Flynn became the radium industry's go-to expert for years. He would travel the country, examining dial painters and consistently declaring them healthy, often in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. He was, in essence, a scientist for hire, a man who provided the conclusions his clients paid for. The historical debate surrounding these experts is intense. Were men like Flynn true believers who were simply mistaken, blinded by the prevailing belief in radium's safety, or were they cynical opportunists, fully aware that they were raiding their scientific credibility for a hefty paycheck from a wealthy corporation? The paper trail of Payment's unfavorable report strongly suggests the latter, painting a grim picture of scientific integrity for sale. You have to lie there on your cot and listen to this. You listen to a man who spent 10 minutes with you declare that the agony you feel every second of every day is just an exaggeration. You listen to him dismiss the work of Dr. Martland, the one man who took the time to measure the poison you exhale with every breath. It is a profoundly disorienting experience, like living in a world where gravity is being debated. You are the living, dying proof, and yet this parade of esteemed gentlemen is trying to convince a court of law that you do not exist. Their words are a form of violence, an attempt to erase your reality. It is the company's final, most desperate act. If you can't deny the disease, then deny the victim. The company's experts have created a fog of doubt. The courtroom is caught in a stalemate of conflicting scientific testimony. Who is to be believed? The county medical examiner with his local laboratory, or the distinguished professors from Columbia University? Raymond Berry knows he needs something dramatic, something irrefutable to cut through the noise. He needs evidence that is both scientifically sound and emotionally powerful. He needs to call a witness who cannot be cross-examined, slandered, or intimidated. He needs to call a witness from the grave. The plan is audacious and macabre. Berry petitions the court for an exhumation. He wants to dig up the body of one of the first dial painters to die, a woman named Margaret Carlo, who had worked as a foreman at the studio. The company had attributed her death to syphilis, a claim her family always vehemently denied. Berry's gamble is that her body, even after years in the earth, will still hold the secret. The judge, swayed by the extraordinary circumstances of the case, grants the order. On a cold, overcast day, a small group gathers in a quiet cemetery. It consists of medical officials, legal representatives from both sides, and a few members of the deceased woman's family, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and grim determination. You are not there, of course. You are too late for the news with a sense of nervous anticipation. The diggers set to work. The sound of their shovels hitting the damp earth is the only sound that breaks the silence. Finally, they reach the coffin. It is carefully raised from the ground. Dr. Martland is there, ready to conduct his tests. As soon as the lid is opened, even before any instruments are used, the truth is obvious. The remains of the woman are visibly, unmistakably radioactive. In the dim light of the overcast day, her bones emit a faint, ghostly luminescence. The company's lawyer, who is there to witness the procedure, turns pale and takes a step back. Dr. Martland then takes samples. He takes fragments of bone and tissue and rushes them back to his lab. The tests he performs are conclusive. Not only are the remains radioactive, they are dangerously radioactive. He calculates that the amount of radium still present in her skeleton is enough to kill several people. The tests for syphilis, the company's official cause of her death, come back negative. This is the moment that shatters the company's defense. Their star experts had testified that the amount of radium ingested was trivial. They had argued that the human body would naturally expel such a substance. But here is the proof. Dug up from the cold earth, the poison does not leave. It stays. It persists even after death. A tireless, glowing testament to the lie. A particularly strange and chilling detail from the exhumation is the state of the coffin itself. Later analysis showed that the wood of the coffin, particularly the parts that were in direct contact with the skeleton, had also become radioactive. The woman's body had been slowly irradiating its own burial container for years. It was a poison so powerful it contaminating it touched even in death. This act of digging up a body to serve as evidence in a legal case was almost unheard of at the time. The historical debate surrounding it is less about the scientific findings and more about the ethics. Was it a necessary, even heroic, act to uncover the truth, or was it a grotesque violation of the sanctity of the grave? For you and the other Radium Girls, it was a profound act of loyalty. Margaret Carlo, in death, was speaking for all of you. Her body became the final, unimpeachable witness. The news of the exhumation is a legal earthquake. The company's lawyers are in a state of panic. Their entire case was built on the idea that their experts were more credible than yours. Now, their expert testimony has been proven false by the most dramatic evidence imaginable. There is no way to cross-examine a radioactive skeleton. There is no way to argue with a self-photograph taken by the bones of the dead. The fog of doubt has been blasted away. The truth is now as clear and as stark as the glow from those exhumed bones. The company has been caught in a lie of staggering proportions. They have no more experts to call, no more motions to file. And you, lying in your sickbed, finally feel the ground shift. The lull, exhausting battle of words is over. The silence from the grave has spoken louder than any of them. The exhumation is the final blow. The company's defense has crumbled. Their experts are discredited, their lies exposed. Victory seems within your grasp. But the company has one last, cruel card to play the calendar. Even with the truth revealed, the legal process grinds on. There will be appeals, more hearings, more delays. It could be months, even years, before a final verdict is reached and any money is actually paid. You don't have years. You don't even have months. The judge in your case, a man named William Clark, is acutely aware of this. He sees you fading before his very eyes. In an act of judicial intervention that was highly unusual for the time, he declares that he will not let justice be drowned in a sea of appeals. He puts immense pressure on both sides to reach a settlement out of court. He essentially tells the company's lawyers that if they continue to fight, they will lose, and he will ensure the process moves as quickly as he can possibly make it. This forces the company to the negotiating table. For the first time, their representatives are not there to deny and deflect, but to talk numbers. It's a surreal experience. After years of being told you were lying, that you were sick because of your own moral failings, the company is now implicitly admitting guilt. They are not offering you help. They are trying to buy your silence. The negotiations are tense. Raymond Barry fights for every dollar, for every medical expense, for every ounce of dignity the settlement can provide. The company, ever focused on its bottom line, tries to get away with the smallest possible amount. They are no longer fighting for their reputation, which is already in tatters. They are fighting to minimize the financial damage. Finally, a deal is reached. The terms are announced in a hushed courtroom. Each of you, the 5 women who brought the suit, will receive a lump sum payment of $10,000 th. For the time, it's a significant amount of money, the equivalent of a small fortune. The company also agrees to pay all your past, present, and future medical and legal bills. And, perhaps most importantly, they agree to provide each of you with an annual pension of $600 for as long as you live. It is, on paper, a total victory. You have won. The newspapers hail it as a landmark decision, a triumph of the little guy against a corporate giant. Radium Girls win settlement. The headlines scream. Your friends and family weep with relief. But you know the truth. This is a hollow victory. The money will ease your family's financial burden. It will pay for the doctors and the painkillers that make your existence barely tolerable. But it cannot buy you a new jaw. It cannot rebuild your crumbling spine. It cannot cleanse the poison from your bones. The pension, the one that is supposed to be paid for as long as you live, is the cruelest joke of all. The company's own actuaries have calculated with cold statistical precision that none of you will live long enough to collect it for more than a year or 2. The settlement is not a promise for your future, it's a payment for your death. One of the more peculiar and telling details of the settlement was the company's insistence on a non-disclosure clause. They wanted to prevent you from ever speaking publicly about the case again. It was a final, desperate attempt to control the narrative, to put the genie of their own making back in the bottle. But the story was already too big to public. The name Radium Girls had become a permanent part of the national vocabulary. The historical debate here is whether this settlement should be viewed as a triumph or a tragedy. Was it all unmarked victory that paved the way for future worker safety laws, or was it a pittance, a shockingly small price for a corporation to pay for knowingly destroying the lives of dozens of young women? The answer is that it was both. It was a legal triumph that was also a profound human tragedy. It was the best possible outcome you could have hoped for, and it was, at the same time, a heartbreak inadequate compensation for what you had lost. You accept the terms. You are too tired, too sick, too broken to continue the fight. You need the money to pay for your own care, to ensure your family isn't left with a mountain of debt when you're gone. You sign the papers, your hand shaking not with excitement, but with exhaustion. The long public battle is over. You have won. And now, you can go home to die. The reporters pack up their cameras and notepads. The headlines fade from the front page, replaced by stories of stock market booms and celebrity scandals. The nation's attention moves on. Your story for them has a satisfying ending: the brave, young women who fought the corporate giant and won. But for you, there is no ending. The courtroom drama was just a brief public intermission in a much longer, much more private performance. The legal victory changes nothing inside your body. The Radium does not read the newspapers. It does not respect the court's decision. It is an element, obeying only the laws of physics, and the law of physics it obeys is the law of decay. The settlement money arrives, a check with an impossibly large number on it. It is on your bedside table, a piece of paper that represents the price of your life. It pays for a more comfortable bed. It pays for stronger medicine, to dull the edges of the pain. It pays for a private nurse to help you with the simple tasks of eating and drinking, which have now become monumental challenges. It pays for everything except a cure. The poison is a patient bookkeeper, and it continues to keep its accounts. The anemia worsens, leaving you with a profound, bone-deep fatigue that no amount of rest can touch. The necrosis in your jaw continues its slow, inexorable march. But now, a new and more terrifying chapter of the illness begins. The constant bombardment of alpha particles on your cells has had its inevitable effect. It has caused a mutation. Your own bone cells, the very building blocks of your skeleton, have turned cancerous. You begin to develop sarcomas, massive, aggressive tumors that grow directly from the bone. A hard, unnatural growth appears on your hip. Another on your arm. They are not like the soft lumps of other cancers. They are as hard as stone, an architecture of pain built by your own body. Cruel punchline of radium poisoning: it didn't just cause your bones to rot, it caused them to grow monstrously against you. This specific development, the prevalence of aggressive osteoarthritis, is one of the most brutal medical details of your case. While the radium jaw was the most visible and earliest symptom, it was often these fast-growing bone cancers that delivered the final blow. The radium had transformed the very framework of your body into a factory for its own destruction. You lie in your bed and you watch the world through a window. You see children playing, you see neighbors heading to work, you see the seasons turn. Your life has shrunk to the four walls of your room, your world defined by the rhythm of medication and the geography of your own pain. You are in your early 20s, an age when life should be a grand, unfolding adventure. Instead, you are an old woman in a young woman's body, waiting for the end. Historians, looking back at your letters and the accounts of your families, still argue about the true impact of the settlement. Did it bring you a measure of peace in your final months, knowing your family would be cared for? Or was it a source of profound bitterness, a constant, tangible reminder of the price you paid? Some accounts suggest you found solace in providing for your loved ones, a final act of love and responsibility, lingering anger that no amount of money could soothe. The truth is likely that you felt both. You were grateful for the security and at the same time, you looked at the check and thought, this is what they think my life is worth. The company, for its part, quietly moves on. The settlement, while expensive, was far cheaper than a protracted legal battle and a guilty verdict. They change their safety procedures, at least on paper. They provide some protective gear to their chemists. But the practice of lip pointing, in some dial painting studios around the country, continues for years, a testament to the stubborn inertia of habit and greed. Your victory was not an end to the story, but the beginning of a new one. The money will soon be gone, spent on the cost of your dying. Your body will soon be gone, consumed by the relentless fire within. But the story of the Radium Girls, your name, your sacrifice that is just beginning to take root. You have suffered, you have fought, and you have won a hollow victory. But in doing so, you have created something that will outlast the poison itself, a warning. Your pain is about to be transformed into a legacy. You will not live to see it. Most of you won't. You will pass away in the quiet of your sick rooms, the echoes of the courtroom battle long faded. The world, it seems, has forgotten you, but the seed you planted with your lawsuit, watered with your suffering, begins to grow in the places where laws are made. Your story becomes a powerful cautionary tale. It is no longer just a sensational newspaper headline. It is a case study, discussed in law schools and medical journals, and in the halls of government. The image of you being carried into the courtroom on a stretcher is a potent symbol that lawmakers cannot easily ignore. You have put a human face on the abstract concept of industrial disease. Before your case, the legal landscape for workers was bleak. The burden of proof was almost entirely on the employee. You had to prove not only that your work made you sick, but that your employer knew it would make you sick. It was an almost impossible standard to meet. And the rigid statute of limitations, the 2-year clock that started ticking on your first day of work, was a legal wall that blocked justice for countless workers who suffered from slow-acting occupational diseases. Your lawsuit changes that. It becomes the catalyst for a wave of reform in labor law. The concept of proof of occupational disease is redefined. The legal precedent you set, that the clock on the statute of limitations should start when the disease is discovered, not when the exposure happens, is adopted into law in state after state. This single change, born from your struggle, opens the door to justice for thousands of future workers who would otherwise have been silenced by a legal technicality: miners with black lung, asbestos workers with mesothelioma, factory workers exposed to chemical solvents. The legal ground they would later stand on was ground that you broke. Your case also leads to the creation of new government agencies and new regulations. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, which would be established decades later, has its conceptual roots in tragedies like yours. The idea that the government has a right and a duty to set and enforce workplace safety standards to protect workers from the negligence of their employers is powerfully reinforced by your story. Radium is one of the very first substances to be regulated by these new industrial hygiene standards. It's a strange and little-known fact that some of the first comprehensive safety standards for handling radioactive materials were developed not for nuclear power plants or weapons labs, but for the humble dial painting industry. The protocols for ventilation, for protective clothing, for the banning of lip pointing, these were all direct results of your sacrifice. The lead screens and sealed containers that would become standard in the nuclear age were first tested and implemented in the studios where other young women continued to paint with light. Historians and legal scholars still debate the exact speed and scope of these reforms. Was your case the single spark that lit the fire of reform, or was it one of many contributing factors in a long, slow movement for workers' rights? The consensus is that while the movement was already underway, your story provided a uniquely powerful and public impetus. You made the abstract horrifying concrete. It's one thing to talk about acceptable risk in a boardroom. It's another thing to see a photo of a young woman with her jaw in a box. You are gone. Your personal struggles are over, but your collective story takes on a life of its own. It becomes a force for change. The radium continues its silent, 1600-year decay in your bones, buried in the quiet earth of the cemetery. But the legacy of your fight decays much more slowly. It becomes part of the legal and social fabric of the country. Every time a worker today wins a compensation claim for a disease that took years to develop, they are walking in your footsteps. Every time a safety inspector walks into a factory and demands better ventilation or protective gear, they are enforcing a principle that was written in your blood. You did not get the justice of a long and healthy life. You did not get to enjoy the fruits of your victory, but you achieved a different kind of victory, a vicarious and long-lasting one, but in doing so you helped save countless others. It is a terrible, unfair, but ultimately profound exchange. That exchange, so terrible for you, proved to be a gift to the world of science, a terrible and terribly important gift. Your legacy was not just written in the law books, it was etched into the very foundations of modern physics and medicine. Your fight didn't just change the rules of the workplace, it changed the rules of the workplace. It changed the rules of the atom, or at least humanity's understanding of them. Before you, the scientific understanding of radiation's effect on the human body was primitive. They knew that massive, external doses of radiation could cause burns, something Marie Curie herself had experienced. But the danger of internal emitters, tiny particles of radioactive material taken inside the body, was a vast, unexplored territory. The prevailing wisdom, bolstered by the quackery of radium tonics, was that in small doses it was harmless, perhaps even beneficial. It was you who taught them how wrong they were. Your bodies became the textbook. You were, in the cold language of science, the first significant human data set for the long-term effects of ingested radium. For decades after your death, scientists would continue to study your cases. They analyzed the medical records. They tested the exhumed remains. Dr. Maitland and his successors created a field of study that had never existed before: radiobiology, the study of how radiation affects living things. You taught them how the body metabolizes radium, mistaking it for calcium. You taught them how it settles in the bones, a permanent, radiating poison. You taught them how the constant alpha particle bombardment destroys bone marrow, leading to aplastic anemia. And you taught them how it eventually triggers the runaway growth of sarcomas. Every agonizing stage of your illness be tapped in a new and terrifying manual of a modern poison. This led to the creation of a chillingly sterile scientific concept: body burden. It's a neat, sterile, two-word phrase for a universe of pain. It means the total amount of a radioactive substance present in a person's body. Scientists studied you to determine the body burden of radium measured in tiny units called microcuries, and then correlated it with the severity of your symptoms. They created a grim calculus of suffering. They could look at a dial painter, measure the radioactivity she was exhaling, and predict with horrifying accuracy how and when she would likely die. The central scientific debate that your case settled was the threshold theory. For years, many scientists believed there was a safe threshold for radiation exposure. They thought that below a certain level, the body could simply repair any damage. Your lives provided the grim, undeniable answer for a poison that becomes part of your own skeleton and bombards your most sensitive cells at point-blank range. There is no safe harbor. There is no threshold. Every single radioactive atom has the potential to be the one that triggers a catastrophic, fatal mutation. And your unwilling sacrifice had an impact that rippled far beyond the world of watch dials. Just a decade or two after your court case, the world would enter the nuclear age. In secret laboratories across the country, scientists on the Manhattan Project were beginning to work with materials far more radioactive than your paint: plutonium, uranium, polonium. How did they know what a safe level of exposure was for the workers in these new, top-secret facilities? How did they set the standards for handling these incredibly dangerous materials? They studied you. The data gathered from the Radium Girls became the cornerstone of internal radiation safety standards for the entire nuclear era. The numbers that defined your suffering were used to calculate the maximum permissible body burden for plutonium workers in Los Alamos. The story of your crumbling jaws and cancerous bones was a mandatory lesson for the young physicists who were building the atomic bomb. You were the ghost in the machine of the nuclear age, the cautionary tale that, hopefully, prevented countless others from suffering the same fate. It is a profound and deeply ironic legacy. You, a group of working-class girls from a small town, who likely never thought much about atomic physics, became the unwilling pioneers of the field. Your very cells, your bones, your breath, provided the fundamental data that would govern the most advanced and dangerous scientific enterprise in human history. Your names may have been forgotten by many, but your data points are, in a sense, immortal. They are embedded in the safety manuals of every nuclear power plant, every radiation lab, every radiotherapy clinic in the world, you were the first to walk into this strange, glowing, modern wilderness, and the map of its dangers was drawn from the landscape of your bones. You might think that your story, with its legal battles and scientific legacy, was the end of it. You might imagine that your sacrifice was so loud, so public, that it served as a permanent, indelible warning. You might believe that you were the only ones, a singular, tragic sisterhood who walked into the glowing factory and never truly walked out. But the ghosts of industry have a way of multiplying. Your story was not an end. It was an echo. That day was about to be heard. The town is Ottawa, Illinois, a classic Midwestern town on the banks of a river. And in the 1920s it too had a source of pride and prosperity, the Radium Dial Company, later known as the Luminous Process Company. The building wasn't a dark, satanic mill, it was a bright, modern studio on the upper floor of a downtown building. And it was staffed, of course, by young women. Dozens of them. They were paid excellent wages to perform delicate, artistic work. They painted watch dials with luminous paint, and they were all taught the same efficient, deadly technique: lip, dip, and paint. It is a chilling mirror image of your own experience. The girls of Ottawa also glowed in the dark, the talk of the town. They, too, used the glowing paint to decorate their clothes and their smiles for parties. And they, too, were told, repeatedly and with great authority, that the paint was perfectly, absolutely harmless. But there is one crushing difference between your story and theirs. When you started your work in New Jersey, the dangers of radium were a scientific mystery, a whisper in obscure journals. When the girls in Ottawa were sitting at their benches, licking their brushes, in the late 1920s, your story was already a national headline. The lawsuit, the crumbling jaws, the exhumation, it had all been in the newspapers. The dangers were known. The precedent had been set. The founder of the Radium Dial Company in Ottawa was a man who had previously worked for your employer, the United States Radium Corporation. He knew the stories. He knew the risks. And yet, the practice continued. The historical debate here is one that ventures into the darkest corners of corporate ethics. Did the managers in Ottawa simply refuse to believe the science? Did they convince themselves, through some monumental act of self-delusion, that their specific paint formula or their ventilation was somehow safer? Or did they know, and simply decide that the profits were worth a calculated risk to their employees' lives? The evidence, and their subsequent actions, point overwhelmingly to the latter. It was not a tragedy of ignorance, it was a crime of choice. And so the pattern repeated itself like a recurring nightmare. The girls of Ottawa began to get sick. The mysterious stitches, the unhealing gums, the aching hips and crumbling spines. And when they went to the company doctor, they were met with the same wall of denial, the same insidious accusations of syphilis and poor hygiene. This is where the story of a woman named Catherine Wolfe Donahue takes center stage. She was one of the Ottawa dial painters, and her fight would become as legendary as your own. When she sued the company, they used the same tactics against her that were used against you. They delayed. They denied. They tried to wait for her to die. But her lawyer, a man named Leonard Grossman, refused to let that happen. Catherine became so ill she could not leave her home, let alone travel to a courthouse. So in a scene that is almost too poignant to believe, the courtroom came to her. The judge, the company's lawyers, the court reporters, they all gathered in her small bedroom. Just as it turned out would have to make a house call, Catherine gave her testimony from her deathbed, propped up on pillows, her voice a whisper. But her resolve was strong as steel. It was a final, desperate act to ensure the truth was heard before it was too late. You were not alone. You were simply the first. You were part of a larger, tragic constellation of glowing girls, separated by geography but united by a shared, luminous poison. The girls in Ottawa were your sisters in suffering. They fought the same fight, against the same lies, and their victory, when it finally came, was built upon the foundation of your own. Their case further solidified the legal precedents you had established, adding another, powerful chapter to the story of the Radium Girls. Your story wasn't a single isolated event. It was a plague that had more than one epicenter. And the discovery of these other ghosts, these other victims, proves that the crime was not just a mistake made by one company. It was a sickness in an entire industry. The years pass. The decades turn. The bright, airy studios where you once worked are shuttered and abandoned. The world moves on to new technologies, new wonders, new dangers. Your story fades from the headlines and becomes a footnote in history books, a half-remembered tale of a bygone era. You, the women who glowed, are now at rest, silent beneath the manicured lawns of local cemeteries. But your story isn't quite over. The radium inside you, that tireless elemental engine, does not respect the stillness of the grave. It continues its work, obeying its own immutable 1600-year clock. And even in your final resting place, you continue to send a message. You continue to send a message. It's a strange and haunting thought. Decades after your death, if a scientist with a sensitive Geiger counter were to walk through the cemetery where you are buried, the instrument would begin to click and shatter as it passed over your grave. The sound of your radioactivity, the faint but persistent energy still pouring out of your bones, would be clearly, measurably present. You are, in a very real sense, a permanent beacon, a source of a quiet, invisible light that will not be extinguished for millennia. Your graves have, over the years, become impromptu scientific laboratories. In the 1950 seconds and 60 seconds, a team of scientists from the Argonne National Laboratory undertook a long-term study of the surviving dial painters and the remains of those who had passed away. They were trying to build a complete picture of the long-term effects of radium, and you were their most important subjects. With the permission of your families, some of your remains were exhumed once more. Not for a legal battle this time, but for the sake of pure science. These scientists, working with levels of current protection that you were never afforded, performed detailed analyses of your skeletons. They measured the exact distribution of the radium, finding it concentrated in the areas of most rapid bone growth. They confirmed with heartbreaking precision the grim calculus that linked the amount of radium in your bones to the cancers that killed you. One of the most morbidly fascinating details to come out of these later studies was the discovery of hotspots of radiation within the bones. The radium wasn't evenly distributed. It tended to cluster in certain areas, creating microscopic zones of intense radioactive bombardment. These hotspots, scientists concluded, were almost certainly the precise points where the fatal sarcomas had begun to grow. It was as if they had found the microscopic ground zero of your cancer. The historical debate around these later exhumations is a quiet one, centered on the ethics of disturbing the dead for scientific knowledge. But the consensus is that the information gained was invaluable. Your bodies became the calibration standard for the entire field of internal dosimetry, the science of measuring radiation inside the body. Instruments used to protect nuclear workers today are often calibrated. That is your final, unwitting gift to science. So you lie there, under the grass and the flowers, under a simple stone bearing your name and your dates. To a casual observer, it is a peaceful, ordinary grave, but it is a site of immense, slow-burning energy. It is a monument not just of memory, but of physics. The atoms within your bones are still, at this very moment, exploding in tiny, silent bursts of light and energy, just as they did when you were alive. The light that once made you the star of the dance hall, the light that betrayed you and consumed you, has become your most enduring memorial. It is a quiet, invisible glow from the grave, a permanent reminder of the price you paid, a signal sent out into the long, dark future, warning any who know how to listen of the beautiful, terrible power that you held, for a short and tragic time, within yourselves. In the end, it's easy to let your story become an abstraction. It can become a legal precedent, a scientific data set, a cautionary tale. It's easy to remember the headline, the Radium Girls, and forget the girls themselves. But you were not a headline. You were not a symbol. You were human beings. You had dreams that had nothing to do with glowing paint or courtrooms. You were Grace and Catherine, Amelia and Quinta, Edna Ombina. You were Hazel and Sarah, Irene and Catherine. You were hundreds of others whose names are not recorded in the history books, but whose suffering was just as real. You were girls who loved the latest fashions, who saved your money for a new dress or a trip to the city. You were girls who went to dances, who flirted with boys, who whispered secrets with your friends during lunch breaks. You were daughters who helped your parents pay the mortgage. You were sisters who bought treats for your younger siblings. You dreamed of getting married, of having children, of a small house with a garden. You dreamed of a normal, quiet, ordinary life. The radium took all of that away. It didn't just take your health, it took your future. It took your identity. You are no longer Grace, the aspiring bookkeeper, or Catherine, the girl with the infectious laugh. You became Grace the invalid, Catherine the plaintiff. Your lives were hijacked by your illness, your personalities eclipsed by your pain. One of the most human and heartbreaking details that gets lost in the grand narrative is the simple, daily reality of your final years. The struggle to eat with a jaw that was no longer whole. The shame of needing a family member to help you with the most basic tasks. The frustration of watching your friends get married and start their own lives while you were confined to a single room. The profound, aching loneliness of an illness that nobody else could truly understand. Your legacy is vast and important, written in law and science. But your story is also small and intensely personal. It's the story of a promise that turned into a betrayal, of a dream that became a nightmare. It is a reminder that behind every great industrial advance, behind every miracle product, there is a human cost. And that cost is rarely paid by the men in boardrooms who reap the profits. It is paid by the workers, by the young women with nimble fingers, by the people who are told to trust their employers, who believe in the bright, shining promise of the future. The historical debate that will likely never be settled is the question of remembrance. How do we properly remember you? As tragic victims of corporate greed, as heroic pioneers who fought for workers' rights, as unwilling martyrs for scientific progress. You were all of these things. To focus on just one is to diminish the complex experience. You were victims who refused to be victimized. You were ordinary girls who were forced by extraordinary circumstances to become heroes. Your story is not just about radium. It's about what happens when human lives are treated as disposable. It's about the power of ordinary people to demand justice in the face of insurmountable odds. It's about the quiet courage it takes to speak the truth, even when your voice is a whisper, even when you are speaking from your own deathbed. And so, we remember your names. We remember your faces from the faded, black and white photographs. We remember the laughter in the studio, the shimmer of your dresses in the dance hall, and we remember the light, the beautiful, treacherous, and ultimately unforgettable light. You are not a statistic, you are not a footnote. You are the Radium Girls, and your story, once heard, will never be forgotten. Then so the story of the girls who glowed now softens, its final words dissolving into the quiet air of your room. The sharp edges of their pain have begun to blur, the echoes of the courtroom have grown distant and indistinct, like a conversation heard from very far away. All that remains now is a gentle, persistent memory, like the faint and silvery light from a star that has traveled 1,000 years to reach you. You can feel the world of the studio, with its bright windows and its dust of captured starlight, slowly fading from view. The dance halls and the sick rooms dissolve around you, becoming less a place you have visited and more a gentle dream you are now leaving behind. It is perfectly all right to let the names and the dates, the injustices and the victories, all drift away from your mind, like soft clouds passing across a moonlit sky. They are at rest now, their long, long fight is over, and their story has been told, enduring glow that marked their bones. You can imagine it now not as a warning, but as a tiny, peaceful nightlight in the vast, quiet landscape of history. A whisper from the past that simply says it is now time for your own rest, a time for deep and healing quiet. There is nothing left for you to hold on to, nothing to analyze or understand, only the comfortable weight of your body and the gentle, rhythmic pull of slumber as you sink down, a place where all stories end, and all of your own dreams can begin. The final word has been whispered. If your mind is still gently stirring, you're welcome to drift into another of my stories. If not, I wish you a deep and peaceful slumber. Good night.